What's up, everyone? Welcome to Podsauce. I am Alicia Renee.
And I'm Dax Holt. And if you don't know what Podsauce is, which a lot of people are questioning, what is Podsauce? Alicia, explain what Podsauce is.
That's funny you should ask. Thank you so much for asking. Podsauce is your podcast discovery show. There are 3 million unique podcasts out there, over 50 million episodes of content.
People are looking for, they want a cut down version. They just want to get to the chase. And so that's why we're here. We're going to weed through all the podcasts out there and recommend some really quality content.
We are the short summary that comes along with every, what is it, when you watch a TV show? What is this episode about?
Yeah, exactly. We're the trailer.
Podsauce. There you go.
We're the trailer.
We're the trailer.
Look at us. We're the trailer of podcasts.
We just keep getting better and better. We are the trailer of podcasts.
And that being said, we're going to just jump right into it because one of the segments we do here is called If You Like This,
You'll like that.
You've been waiting to snake that one for me, haven't you?
Yeah, hate it. I haven't even broken eye contact with the camera.
So today's podcast that I want to recommend in If You Like This, You'll Like That, it's called Dark Fonzie. So if you like WTF with Marc Maron, which is a very popular podcast, we strongly believe that you'll like Dark Fonzie. You know why?
Why?
Because it's also hosted by Marc Maron.
Well, what do you know, Mark? Getting checks over here, you're getting checks over there, check everywhere.
So Mark and his buddy Del Rey, they now have a conversational podcast. So if you've ever listened to WTF, the first 20 minutes is devoted towards kind of like a rant or Mark talking about things that are going on in his life or things that he's interested in. And so it's a 20-minute conversational part. Well, now they have broken that out, and that is now a full podcast, and it's called Dark Fonzie. And here's the description of it.
Okay.
2 middle-aged guys with no kids, no cigars, and no love for sports talking about life, cats, dogs, rock music, movies, clothes, food, comedy, and most things that have nothing to do with kids, cigars, and sports.
Hilarious. Hilarious.
So, it's a little bit of a twist on that, and they, some of the couple episodes that they have on there already is one's called Daddy Issues, one's Rage Against All Machines. So basically,
What's the cigarettes, booze, and Viagra? What's that about?
well, it says the guys dive into all kinds of topics like early days of drinking, pellet guns, and the loyalty to a cigarette brand.
Hilarious.
So again, if you like WTF with Marc Maron, we believe you will like Dark Fonzie. So that is our, if you like this, you'll like that.
Oh, Dark Fonzies, you say. Wow. If you guys want to find out more about Dark Fonzies, go to podsauce.com.
And we got a big show coming up. We got some of my friends coming on today.
You have the homies coming in?
I do. Well, I've got one of the homies coming on today,
Okay.
Andy Holloway from the Fantasy Footballers podcast, which is a huge podcast all about football, and especially, it's fantasy football time now. So everyone's into it, and their podcast is like the #1 podcast for fantasy football lovers.
Has he shown Trophy Smack some love? Has he gotten some Trophy Smack?
Massive love.
Okay, then. We shall give him all the love we got to give then, honey. And not this side-eye that I was... How dare you not show some love if you do fantasy football.
Yeah, so I'm very excited to have Andy on, and so much more coming up, so stick around. This is Podsauce. Welcome back to Podsauce, your podcast discovery show. I'm Dax Holt.
I am Alicia Renee.
All right, so you got an Alicia pick for us right now.
I do. Here's the Getcha Gotcha.
Okay.
Here's the Getcha Gotcha. So but it all lends itself to the beauty of a show like Podsauce, right? Where we're discovering podcasts. So Dax and I, our homework every week is to bring at least one podcast to the table that we've discovered or that we're already currently listening to, right? And I'm pretty much so a dog going to the old well. So I'm just, same old vomit. I'm going right back to it. And so with this particular one, I was very excited and proud of myself for venturing out. However, upon listening to it, it wasn't what I thought it was. Doesn't mean that it's not a good podcast. It just kind of, so.
I've had those, so I'm totally there with you.
Yeah, so let me get into it.
Okay.
So my podcast pick of the week is 912. And it's all about, it's 7 different stories, unique stories. They try to come at it from a comedic perspective. And I say try to because some episodes weren't funny to me, but that doesn't mean they weren't funny or relatable even to our listeners. But it's about people who woke up on 9/12, the day after, obviously, 9/11, in a completely different world, right? And so one episode that I did find very interesting, mainly because as an actor, there was some showmanship involved. This guy who took this job on this boat, it's kind of like a murder mystery dinner type situation, but they did like a fantasy boat world. So that whole environment was set in like the early 1800s, which everything about that time. So they didn't have access to phones. I say that to say they didn't have access to TVs and all these other things. And so they woke up on 9/12 in a completely different world, unbeknownst to them.
Wow.
Right? And so, because the world as we knew it had changed, people couldn't travel back to their perspective because a lot of people were from different countries. And, a lot of people on that boat were also from the U.S. And obviously you couldn't enter back into the U.S. the same way you left the U.S., during that time. So it just covers, again, I think the comedic edge is kind of just to give a little medicine with some orange juice, because obviously talking about 9/12 and the World Trade Center, that the Twin Towers, what happened with the Twin Towers, is not an easy thing to talk about, and so they just try to find some comedy space there.
The funny thing is, even with you maybe not absolutely loving this, I'm still interested.
Well, honey, I'm an actor. I can give a good show.
But I think that's like the juice of Podsauce, is that even if we don't love it, there's going to be someone out there that loves these podcasts.
1000%.
And that, to me, there is something interesting about these stories of people who woke up, like you said, in a totally different world, because after 9/11, everything changed for us.
Completely everything changed. The way we travel, access to information, Big Brother and their prevalence in all of our lives. The world completely changed. I think it's just, I remember exactly where I was on 9/11, so maybe it's just really hard for me to wrap my mind around people who had
no knowledge.
No knowledge. Yeah. I mean, I can feel where I was.
I still see the TV with the buildings in my mind, looking at the TV.
%. Yep. So I think that's where I thought it was going to be one thing, but it was a completely different thing. Not to say that it's not a good thing. It's just a different thing, this podcast. But 9/12, it's hosted by Dan Tubraski. I hope I said his name right. I did my best. But he is the host of Missing Richard Simmons and Running from Cops.
Oh, Missing Richard Simmons.
I knew you liked that
We
one.
need to get that podcast.
You've mentioned
Can
that
we get
before.
him on here? Producer Angie?
Yeah.
We need to get him, because this Missing Richard Simmons.
It's good.
Well, it's just, there's so much bizarreness to that story, and for someone to be so out there. Whatever, that's for another episode.
Yeah.
But okay, I'm in.
Yeah, and it's a Pineapple Street production, so we love them around these parts.
We do.
But this podcast kind of threw me for a loop-de-loop, but 9/12 is my podcast pick of the week.
Awesome. Well, if you want to get more information on Alicia's podcast pick of the week, you can head on over to podsauce.com, sign up for our newsletter. That way we can just shoot you our recommendations directly to your email box and make it super easy for you.
Don't go anywhere, guys, because we have more coming up. This is Podsauce. Hi guys, I am Alicia Renee.
And I'm Dax Holt. Welcome back to Podsauce.
Yes.
All right, I'm excited, Leash.
Yeah, you are.
I'm excited. I got one of my buddies on the show today.
I was like, Dax, you're going to have to take this one away because this is all hometown, homegrown.
So we are very fortunate because, number one, right now, we are in the midst of fantasy football season. It just started. Everyone's going crazy.
I know. I can't find my brother or any male in my family with a flashlight. Can't find them.
But right now, the podcast you're going to listen to this time of year is the Fantasy Footballers. And we got Andy Holloway on. Andy, what's up, man?
What's going on, Dax? Alicia, thank you for having me on. You're right. We are in the middle of the madness. I think I just saw NFL ratings are up. I mean, people are ready for full-time football right now.
Dude, it's especially after last year where it was like, are we going to have a season? Are we not? Like, people didn't know last year if we were going to have fantasy football because football itself was like kind of
up
on
in the air.
Line. Yeah.
So, Andy, break it down for me because everyone who listens to our show knows that I know absolutely nothing about sports. I don't have it for you, babe. But break down fantasy football so everyone can get on board. Yes.
Pack up. Let's get comfy for this one.
No problem. I'll keep it simple
skinny.
because I think the big thing that fantasy football does for people and why it's so addictive and why you don't see any of your family this time of year is because it makes every game interesting. It's not just your hometown team. It's every single team out there. A horrible Monday night game between two losing teams becomes exciting for the 12 people in your league because one of them has a matchup relying on one player. I think it brings engagement to the sport. It brings us fandom to another level. And, we've had a lot of players on the show, and all of a sudden they have fans that aren't just the hometown teams. They're the fantasy fans. And they hear from them from the sidelines, or they get the thank yous on social media. And I think it just brings another, amplified level of fandom to the season.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, I'm sorry. If I'm understanding you correctly, is it like you pick your team, a person from here, a person from there, a person from that played their particular position, and then so in a fantasy world, this would be what my team would look like?
Your team is made up of players from across the NFL.
Okay.
And so what he's saying is you get invested because it may be a game that you would never watch, but you watch because you have one player out there scoring points that is going to help your team beat and destroy your friends.
Boom.
And
yeah, a lot of it is shame-based. We like to shame the people around us that are our dear friends. When you win, and you buy trophies, and you wear robes, and you lord it over them for the next calendar year, and then you pretend you're a manager of a team again, and you do it for 15, 20 years. And no, it's been fun, and we have such a good group of listeners of the show that, they just make it so fun and engaging. And I think that connection is why it's why we got into it as a podcast was, our major leagues have no money in them, none. It's just for pride. It's just for, that connection point. So we absolutely love it.
And Leash, let me just give you an example of how popular their podcast is.
Okay.
So last time I checked, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys were number 29, on the U.S. charts as a whole for your podcast, correct?
We got up to 11 at one
Think
point,
about
which
that.
which was insane, and it really does go to show how big the fantasy football community is, because we shake our heads at it going like, we sit around a table and we talk about these players and we make ridiculous dad jokes and we do it every day. And this many people are coming out to listen because they just, they build you, this with podcasts, they build you into the commute. They build you into the workout time. Maybe it's the mowing the lawn, whatever it is. We've learned from even going on tour and talking to fans face to face. They know you.
Yeah.
They know you because podcasting is so much more intimate than, other forms of media. And, these people have been with you for years, and you're just finally putting a face to a name.
So, Andy, what was that moment like where you looked around at the success that you've amassed, and you're like, I'm making a living off of fantasy football. This is.
I think
space.
we shake our head every year.
Yeah.
I really do. I think, we've got a great team of people, great producers, our developers, and just the community at large that have made this a successful show. But we shake our heads every year when we know we have the privilege of doing something that 99.9% of the world would love to do, that loves football. Like when we started this, our mindset was like, now we can't make a living doing this, but maybe it can make us a few dollars while we go be realtors or go work in software. And it was like, I don't think we understood what podcasting was about to do. And I don't think we understood what fantasy football was about to do, but they were both almost at that, just apex or growth point where it came together and people connected with us. And, there are a lot of other great fantasy podcasts out there too. And that's a nice thing. People listen to 3 or 4, 5 different shows at one time. And we're definitely thankful we get to do it.
And number 1 in sports too, by the way. That's beating out the ESPNs, the CBSs, the Fox Sports. That to me, I think is what is so amazing about your podcast is just, you guys have amassed this amazing audience, which is called the Foot Clan, by the way. That's their fans.
The Foot Clan? I love it.
that follow their podcast. And one thing about fantasy is like for me, I can't watch every game and follow all the players and follow all their stats and who's going to be the next one, the great person to throw on your roster that week. And that's what this podcast does. Andy and Mike and Jason, they come out and they actually give the listeners the advice, and it helps you out in your team. And one other thing, Andy, I had read something that you said that you guys keep this very family friendly, and that might be a big part of your success. Can you kind of go into that a little bit more? Because I think people don't realize it when they're listening, but then once you've said, I go, oh yeah, they never get dirty, or they never cuss, or they never do any of that.
PG.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is a reflection of just like the way we live our lives. We're very much three dads. We're at the same stage of life. We all got three kids. Like that's who we are. And I think part of it, we joke that we're the Disney of the fantasy football world because, you're in the car with your kids. There's so many fans that are driving to take them to school or to go to an event. And like, they know they can put our podcast on. They know that they can just, and they're not going to worry about what we're going to say. It's still going to be funny, right? Like, I think it's hard to be funny and not have to go, to some other level of humor. And so I think it was something we didn't really set out saying, okay, this is going to be the key to success. But it's also something we noticed just from listener feedback early on that was like, hey, I really appreciate this about your show. I listen with my son. I listen with my daughter. And I think that's been something that's been helpful for us as we've grown. And, I'm thankful that that's something, and part of it too is like fantasy football, sports, like some of that culture that we do conscientiously try to change is that basement culture of like, okay, sports is all about dad going and hiding in the basement. Like, no, to us, sports is a family affair.
Yeah.
It's something where like everybody can get involved. Fantasy's the same way. I've got a 10-year-old that's just absolutely nuts about Patrick Mahomes and all of these players every week. He's probably going to pass me up in the next year or two. But it's not something that distances families. It's something that can connect them.
No,
and that's why you need to start playing, Alicia, so you can go connect with all the rest of that family.
I was just about to say, it's so funny because as you were talking, I'm like, yeah, because I remember a lot of my earlier memories when my parents were still married. My dad would take me to college football games, and I enjoy the feel in the stands, or the excitement from my dad as we're rooting for our particular team. So I can see why you've wanted to make this podcast a show that families can listen to. You don't have any fear of something that will come out of your mouth, when you do it. That's why I was smiling. I'm like, yeah. Oh,
and it really brings people together so much. I can't like draft parties and like group texts. I mean, there's something about fantasy football that is about this camaraderie between
we all also
people.
have a little bit of competition in us, right?
Yeah.
Competitiveness. Like we all have like an element of competitiveness within us. It's like, I'm going to beat you, and so anytime you get an opportunity to create a team where, like you said, we're all pseudo managers, we have the eye of for talent, and, you can beat your friends or your family and,
you
get bragging rights.
You bring up a good point. So, Andy, obviously, I own a trophy company, a couple.
What's it called?
Fantasy Champs and Trophy Smack.
There you go.
Thank you.
But,
there you go.
But my question, so I feel that there's a lot of pressure on me to be good at fantasy football just because of my tie-in with my company. So you, who is spitting knowledge constantly in front of millions of people, is there a lot of pressure to actually win your leagues?
Well, I think we do put an appropriate amount of pressure on ourselves to do right by the listeners. And when the podcast started like 6-7 years ago, I think we were more obsessed about our own leagues. Mm-hmm. And then I think as time has gone by, I definitely react more emotionally to a call I made as advice for the listener than I even do for my own team. We've had some consequences of the show, no doubt about it. No one trades with me. I've been complaining about this for the last year and a half. They'll literally say things like, oh, well, if a fantasy expert thinks this is a good trade for him, I'm not even going to touch it. I'm not even going to think about it. So we've had to sacrifice some of the organic enjoyment of the game. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing worse than coming on this show, which we're in a predictive, like, stuff's changing every day. Injuries are happening. Games are being played. Like, we are not an evergreen show like so many of the podcasts that you guys have talked about where, you can go to a true crime drama and it's just as entertaining a year from now or a year in the past as it is today. Our shows expire. I mean, it's like you see the truth. We give you the advice, you go watch on Sunday, and then my Twitter mentions blow up if I screw up, and that's just the way it is. But we are very proud when it goes right. That's for sure.
I wonder if anyone's ever taken the advice from you guys. You know that some of the big companies like Lay's or whatever will have like these huge contests and you'll win like $5 million or something like that if your fantasy team wins.
Like a DraftKings kind of thing?
Yeah, like
Okay.
I wonder if anyone's ever listened to your podcast and like put a team together and cashed out. You know what I mean?
That's a good thing.
That would work.
Have you heard anything
That'd
like that?
be fine. Well, we do hear on the DFS front. So like you bring up DraftKings where people are entering these paid contests, and we have a DFS show as well.
Mhm.
And it's always great to get that feedback that like, hey, this is the first year I've ever competed. I've always been in last place, and now I'm dunking on all my league mates who thought I didn't know anything, or I won big money this week because I played these 3 guys from your DFS show. Like, that's always exciting to hear. And hopefully we're kind of presenting information and then equipping people to make their own calls. Like we try to do that as opposed to saying, yeah, do this, because every league is different.
Yeah.
Scoring systems are different. We want to equip you to be a better player, whether you tune in 3 times a week, 5 times a week. Give you the shortcut that Dax brought up about, look, he doesn't have time to take in all that information. We'll make our eyes bleed watching every game on Sunday, and we'll relay the information to you.
They're kind of the Podsauce of the sporting world.
I was thinking that in my mind, but I'm like, that's too easy, Leash. Don't do it.
So, no, Andy, I want to know, what advice have you given out on the fantasy footballers that came back to bite you in the butt, and you have been getting tweets or responses about it to this day? You were like, man, that person let me down on the field.
There have been a handful of those. And sometimes they've taken place because of injury, where and that's the worst part, is you make a call or you believe in a player and everybody around you says, no, he's too injury prone or he's too messed up. Like I'm living one right now with Raheem Mostert of the 49ers, where I made him my fantasy MVP. And 2 plays into the season, he goes down for the year. So Twitter is being as friendly as Twitter often is about that. But there have been players, like in years past, there was a wide receiver for the 49ers, which I guess I should avoid them in general. But he was making headlines. I made him a my guy. So like every year we name like 3 players that we're planting our flag. We love these players. And luckily, I pivoted off of him at the last possible moment because he never played for them.
Ooh.
They pulled him. They didn't like the attitude. They put him on the bench. And if I had moved forward, I don't know, man. I never would have lived that thing down.
So moves like that put your fantasy football team in last class?
Yeah, I mean, if you make a couple huge mistakes, you can definitely set yourself up for a tougher year. But we always say you don't win or lose your league at the draft. It's just setting the foundation, and other people in your league are going to give up early. And if you kind of, we got an extra week of football this year as they expanded the schedule, so you can work your way back into contention, and maybe one move here, one move there, and you're smiling and you're holding a trophy above your head from Fantasy Champs or Trophy Smack.
Yeah, you like that.
Oh my
That's
God.
what I'm talking about. Indeed.
End it now.
There you go.
This is a podcast discovery show. So what podcasts are you listening to outside of,
Yeah,
your show?
it's funny. I definitely try to turn my attention from football when I go into the podcast listening world. I love the true crime shows in general, like the S Towns and like Root of Evil. I don't know if you guys have heard of that one.
What's that
Root
one
of
about?
Evil. I haven't heard that one. I'm gonna write it down.
It's like this. Yeah, it's the Black Dahlia killer. The history of that and the family that was tied into one of the people accused of potentially being the Black Dahlia murderer. And but it's just kind of a winding, unbelievable revelation type of story. And even going back to like Serial, which kind of started the true crime world off, like Dirty John, like those have been, they get you, right? They kind of hook you.
Yeah, we just talked about
And
Dirty
then
John.
all of a sudden you're finding reasons to drive in your car when you don't need to, because you just want to listen some more and find out what happens next. So
Serial actually is was Dax and mine,
Very
our
first
introduction,
podcast, yeah.
into the space of podcasts.
So good. That first season, absolutely.
Andy from the Fantasy Footballers, thank you so much for joining us. Wishing you much success and try to get some sleep
Appreciate it.
over the next 15 weeks or so. I know this is
I'll do my best.
craziest time of year for you. And if you guys missed anything we talked about today, or you want to get a link directly to the Fantasy Footballers podcast, head on over to podsauce.com. We got all the links, videos, everything there. Sign up for our newsletter.
That Dax is going to be hand delivered. Not me. I have bigger fish to fry. Don't go anywhere, guys. This is Podsauce.
Welcome back to Podsauce. I'm Dax Holt.
I am Alicia Renee. And got a little ditty for you this time around. Top global trending true crime podcasts.
Ooh.
Some of them are murder most foul.
Dude,
Some of them will go under that umbrella.
the true crime, I mean, it really, like, every time I'm reading some of these like premises of the podcast, I get sucked in.
It's so crazy how wildly popular true crime is. It has me thinking that there are either a lot of bootleg, sleuths out there, wannabe detectives, or young cuckoo jukus in training.
I think people just like creepy stories. It fascinates them. That's why it's like watching the news.
Yes, and there could be people learning how to murder and 20 ways to get away with said murder. Coming in at number 5 on our global top true crime trending pods is Monster Presents Insomniac. Now, this one follows host Scott Benjamin, who is, discovering and putting information out there about, some of the lesser known serial killers. However, the deeper he goes into his work and the deeper he goes into discovering, the ins and outs of these serial killers, the more obsessed he becomes, and he just eventually becomes an insomniac. It kind of reminds me of that movie that Jake Gyllenhaal did, what was it, Nightcrawler?
Nightcrawler.
Where he was such an
creepy.
overly obsessive photographer. What's it called?
He was more like a footage stringer guy, getting the nighttime
but just so
crashes.
obsessed and immersed
Yep.
in that space that, he became an insomniac also. So it gives me Nightcrawler vibes.
All right, coming in at number 4 would be The Sneak. This is their 3rd season.
Okay.
This one is about the disappearance of Mario Rossi, which is one of the biggest drug smuggling scandals in NASCAR history.
Give me the drugs. Give me the drugs.
So it dives deep into that investigation, speaking to former gangsters and past loves and DEA agents and undercover informants. I don't know, it sounds pretty interesting.
Sounds interesting. Coming in at number 3, again, this is the top global trending true crime podcast out there, is Sworn, from the producers of Up and Vanished, hosted by Philip Holloway. He is an Atlanta-based defense attorney and former prosecutor. It just explores the complex cases behind America's legal system, or the lack thereof, coming from the perspective of a Black woman.
All right, so number 2, we've got Accused. All right, this is set in 1984. It's about a father of 3 who disappeared under mysterious conditions at work, and basically pieces of bone, his eyeglasses and walkie-talkie, were uncovered inside a vat that reached 1,350 degrees Fahrenheit. Later, it was exposed that the company he was worked for was actually producing uranium, and his children believed that he was murdered because he was going to uncover what this factory was doing.
You mean a whistleblower that the company was
Bing,
trying
bing.
to take out?
Bing, bing.
That couldn't possibly be.
Throw that man in the vat. Yes,
mean?
exactly.
Coming in at number 1, the creme de la creme, and this is the top global trending true crime pod, Suspect. This one actually sounds extremely interesting. I already saved it on my podcast because it combines 2 of my favorite things: a murder most foul and a whodunit. I love me a good whodunit, honey. And this one is based around an apartment complex. They host a really big, huge Halloween soiree. Each level, each room has a completely different theme. Someone ends up dead. How did he die? We don't know. Now, they're asking, well, we do know. You'll find that out as you listen to the show. But they went through DNA testing, witness testimony, evidence that was there. They even called in a psychic. They phoned Cleo to figure out.
Phone Cleo.
They phoned Cleo, honey, to find out what was going on. in this here murder dancery. That's not funny. Why am I laughing? It's not funny, but I'm trying to make it light. But yes, Suspect sounds extremely interesting. I'm going to check it out. We think that a lot of you have clearly checked it out because it is the #1 podcast in the global top trending true crime. So again, we got number 5, Munster Presents Insomniac. The Sneak at number 4. Number 3 is Sworn. Number 2 is The Accused. And number 1, Big Boss Dog, Suspect.
Great list there. And, obviously we got to wrap up the show today. Want to big thanks to Andy Holloway from the Fantasy Footballers for stopping by, chatting with us right in the middle of the height of the fantasy football season. And if you are interested in anything we talked about today, maybe you missed the title of it, head on over to podsauce.com. We have links, we have videos, we have it all of our recommendations, our picks, our odd pods of the week. Everything is there. Or you can also follow us on social media at the Podsauce, and you can follow me at Dax Holt.
And you can follow me at I am Alicia Renee. And until next time, thank you all so much for joining us. In the meantime, be good to yourselves.